everyone's happy. We'll get started. Today's talk about DevOps and continuous integration and continuous delivery with it. For Joomla. Who am I? I'm Andy. I'm a web developer. I live in Aberdeen in the UK. I've been using Joomla for about 10 years, I guess, and I've been a developer for about 20 years. I mainly, the last couple of years, I've been mainly writing APIs and doing quite a lot of DevOps for working for a company that does apps for schools. So we use Joomla as a mobile phone application backend through a RESTful API, and there's hundreds of apps, and some of them are really busy, so it's kind of scale out and scale up sort of thing. This is where Aberdeen is. It's quite a long way from everywhere. This is where I live and work incidentally. But it looks like this inside. There's some sharks along here in the pool and some piranhas down. Actually, it looks like this. So, and you know, I'm not really like standing up and talking person, so apologies if I'm nervous, incoherent, or whatever. I'm mainly sitting in the room writing code. It's good to get out of your comfort zone, apparently. I'm not sure. So DevOps and continuous integration and continuous deployment is like a huge topic in itself. So I thought what we're trying to do is, just give an overview of all the different elements of it, I guess, and dive into some things that are like sort of practical Joomla-centric details. So we'll cover DevOps, continuous integration, continuous deployment. There's quite a lot of overlap between these three areas, really. So typically, I think this is from Seuss's website. There's pretty standard DevOps flow where in the development side of things, you start building, writing code, building, testing code, or planning, do this, and then it sort of moves into the operations side of things, and you're releasing, deploying, upgrading, testing, monitoring, and so that being a picture of DevOps, where continuous integration and continuous deployment come in, or continuous it's really about doing this cycle as quick as, not as quick as possible, but as often as possible, I suppose. And to do that, you've got to automate as much as you can. Yeah, automate everything, maybe. So, bit of background. So, everything is kind of generically based. All the code and examples and stuff. It's kind of using it with the normal sort of Linux sort of platform setup. Other platforms are available. All the examples are in GitHub. I put a repository up yesterday, and jump in and ask anything anytime. There's lots of things that aren't included in the talk, but just because they're not in there doesn't mean they're not important or don't exist. Anyway, getting started. So automations. I don't know. Easily getting started with automations, you kind of automate the thing that takes you longest first. I guess is easy, sort of straightforward. But obviously, you're going to end up writing scripts. So I don't know. What does everyone who uses? I'm just kind of curious of what everyone uses. Who uses Bash for their scripting? You can stick your hands up. Who uses PHP for their scripting? Oh, okay, cool. And who uses JavaScript? Node? Okay, some like more PHP. Yeah, less. That's cool. I like that. It's kind of. I think I kind of tend to use all three, but that's probably just from being disorganized more than anything. And that bit, you know, think, oh yeah, I'll write some node in it because that's fashionable, and then you're like, this is horrible. Fuck this is like JavaScript. Like, then you go back to writing Bash or PHP. But yeah, so I don't know. Some things are kind of just generally handy things like, you know, bits of scripting, you know, that you just kind of end up using all the time. There's some more like kind of DevOps, I guess. But you know, whether it's like, you know, finding a spelling mistake in 300 language files, or you know, this sort of, or you know, finding large files and printing a list of them. You know, find out why you've used up all your disk space and your service things like that. So, but that's, you know, scratching the surface really, I guess. But so yeah, so historically, you know, we've all just written scripts and just run them, you know, as cron jobs or you know, via SSH or locally, you know, just on the command line shell. But yeah, more. There's other options too. For example, moving to sort of a task runner type system. It's you know, more popular now with like sort of using gulp or grunt, you know, to run, you know, even if it's just little things like compiling your CSS or less. But yeah, as a lot of this automation can be done, you know, with if you're sort of larger projects with continuous integration and continuous distribution systems as well, and Headless browser is kind of nice for automation too. So yeah, we'll start talking about updates. So something we'll do. So one, yeah, a handy one. Oh, thanks, Robert. Yeah, the Joomla command line interface. It's quite new. It's really nice if you want to script things. You only just started using it, to be honest, in terms of updates. I used to always just do everything with Headless browser updates. But yeah, so you can update extensions in GitHub, and you just call it like any other command line terminal script. Yeah, so some of these things like installing extensions and running updates, you know, especially if you're managing like hundreds of sites, it's, yeah, it works really well. And yeah, so this is, you know, for updating if you've got your own extensions and the Joomla core as well. I think I need to, yeah, I think there's maybe some more features. Yeah, but another option that really can help with your continuous distribution more is running hook scripts in Git. So I don't know how many people use hook scripts. Git hooks. Okay, that's cool. So basically, it's like the Git, you know, Git hook scripts can either sit like on the they can either sit like on the Git repository or on your local, and basically they just you can script things on Git activity basically. So you know, and then there's hooks for a lot of different actions. So it's you can it's quite nice to use. It's a little bit hard to debug sometimes, especially when it's running on the server. But if it's just little things like having you can, I mean, it's easy enough to start out with messages. You can have things like every time there's an update, it emails someone or sort of thing, or just have it set up. And you can just build them out really once you've got started. So whether it's like update your live site, or so on commit minifying your JavaScript or CSS, or uploading files. It works really nicely. There's there's a few actions you can use. This is just the most useful one, probably in practice. So pre-receive. So that just if you make your script a GitHub a Git hook pre-receive, then it'll run So you can end up using that for unit testing, or it's really nice. And the nice thing about that is you can set it so it rejects. You can have it so it runs through the unit test and it rejects the commit if it fails. Which is it's quite nice. Or and so, some things like post receive. That's really nice for updating your live site servers and stuff. So it gets even with so you can automate a lot without really investing too much time or energy in setting anything up just by using Git hooks. It's kind of nice that you commit your changes and then 2 minutes later your website's updated without touching FTP or anything. It's just really nice. And then it's just it's a nice flow. And after a while you're like, why did I spend so long FTP and Firefox? So there's a few local ones as well. But I tend to mainly use the server repository ones. I'm not sure the terminology is written. Another useful thing, and often you can use in conjunction with Git hooks, is Git FTP. Now, it's really confusing. There's two different Git FTPs. One's a Python script and the other's a Bash script. I've never used the Python one. It's probably fine, but the Bash one's the one I can use. So you can basically set a config file, and it does the FTP stuff for you. And it's nice in a way because you can use if you use it with Git FTP in it, then it uploads, it FTPs up everything. But if you use Git FTP catch up, it looks at the file, it'll only upload basically only uploads the files that change stuff. So that works really well. So you end up with if you have like a post receive, for example, you could put you could put Git FTP catch up in your post receive Git hook, and that's basically your automated deployment that is kind of done, in those two steps. Yeah.
Is it a command line or something else?
Well, it's a Bash script, so just tend to.
It's not okay. It's a file.
Yeah, it's just, but I think in some distributions it's you can install it with apt. So so I just I tend to put all the useful scripts in in one directory, or put it in the environment variable so it can be just called anywhere. So any questions about this? Git hooks or Git FTP?
So that's presumably relative to the repository root.
Yeah, that's a good question actually. So what you can so there's two different ways you can set this up. So if you use if you use the commit Git hook, then you can set a different one on each branch, basically, or you so it's different actions per branch. Sort of thing. But if you just use the post receive, then that's kind of more like you just put it in the in the master or trunk. Yeah.
So the deployment will obviously go to the master release version.
Yeah. But so for example, if you could use the commit one, you could have, if you had a like dev stage in prod, you could have whenever you committed to dev, it ran the automated steps, but whenever you committed to prod, it would just do the deploy. So that, you can have a nice flow like that. So, it's really flexible in a lot of ways. But it's best to start with something simple, and then just add to it. If you sort of try and make a avoid just a more gentle learning curve with it, sort of thing. yeah, because it's not always that simple to debug. So, yeah. Which is the only downside of it. Yeah. So, I'm gonna quickly look at. So that's in terms of updating things, but yeah, in terms of like deploying whole instances of your Joomla, there's a lot of different options really. I really like Akeeba. Never sure whether it's UNiTE or UNiTE. Yeah. And Docker's a good option for the moment. And so we'll just dive into some of these options. So yeah. How many people have used Akeeba UNiTE? Oh, I'm always kind of amazed that it's not so widely used because it's really nice. Yeah, so basically, it automates the extraction of Akeeba backup JPA files on the command line. So it's just a PHP script that you run. So, and it has an XML-based config, and if say hypothetical thing, if you had like 100 sites on a server, you want to move them to another server, you can basically take the back them all up with Akeeba backup, and then move the backups, and you basically has this concept of an inbox folder. So for each task you want it to do, you create an XML file which describes the task, and you put that XML file in the inbox, and then when you run Akeeba, it just basically actions each of those XML files. So you can you've got your 200 sites, and so you just basically write a quick XML file for each one, and then put the JPA in the directory too, and then just kick it off, and it will work through extracting each one.
Is it like a mass Kickstarter?
Yeah, exactly. It's like
Kickstarter across all of them.
Yeah. It's basically like Kickstarter except with a command line sort of thing and configuration without the user interface. Yeah, it's really nice. You could probably do the same thing using Kickstarter and a headless browser or something like that. That would work.
You can join JPA files with Kickstarter, and that's all just for one domain. So it's just
Yeah. It's really nice. Yeah, so you can download it from user place, and you just set a few. There's a few paths in the config, which is just basically directories of your server you'd set up, and it works really well. It's quick as well, So yeah, you end up with like this is a config file something like this. You can see, you tell it what the JPA file is called, you tell it what your database information, and like all the questions that Kickstarter asks you basically. Like database username, password, prefix. Yeah. So when it runs, it basically parses all these XML files and then actions them one at a time. So we use it a lot for. Yeah. So basically, how much is the time? We use it a lot for creating new sites. So basically, so the way the apps work, it uses Joomla as a management system for managing the content on the apps, basically. So, and it's a bunch of custom components. And, so when they build a new app, everything gets kicked off and gets built for iTunes and Google Play, and we automatically build a back end for that based on a set of seeds, different seed templates, different JPA files and stuff. So we provision a couple of dozen a week get created using the automated scripting. So basically, we end up calling Akeeba. Anyway, so it's hard to explain, hard to show like code in talks, but so we wrote a script, and basically you pass in like 3 parameters, and it goes and it writes your XML file for you, and then kicks off Akeeba UNiTE to So this is what we use for provision. So it's so it's quite easy, and all this stuff is like normal. So basically, you have a base XML file, and then you know you replace a bunch of placeholder stuff in it, and then write it out again to a new XML file, and then you know this is yeah. So this is sort of running the Akeeba UNiTE on with my language. I know it's kind of like running exec PHP from a PHP client. But yeah, so that works really nicely. Yeah. So well, some of these are big topics in themselves, themselves as well. So it's good. It's worthwhile touching on Jenkins and Travis because particularly Jenkins has really revolutionised over you know since its inception DevOps and continuous integration and deployment sort of things. So, yeah. So how many people use Jenkins or Travis? Yeah. So Jenkins is kind of the original, and then Travis sort of in a sense overtook Jenkins because it's more a config file based, but the more recent versions of the Jenkins use jenkinsfile. Yeah. So yeah, typically you use one of the Jenkins or Travis, you know, to run tasks within your continuous integration workflow, I guess. Not the best description. And more recently, you know, we have Docker as well, which is probably enough for a whole nother talk to you. But I don't know, like Docker's great for development, and some things are really nice. You know, like if you want to test your extension in like 5 different versions of PHP, you can just spin up a spin up a Joomla Docker instance with that version of PHP, or you know. I'm not quite sure about the whole the idea of using Docker for production. I don't know. It's fine, you know. It just doesn't make sense to me. But some people, you know.
Why don't you like it?
Yeah, I don't know. I think maybe I'm not quite. A friend of mine in Glasgow, Dave, he's a Docker evangelist, and we have the same conversation in the pub all the time. But it's a willy thing. I think because it's like transitory. You know, it sort of feels. I guess you know the ability to spin them up and down instances quickly. It's it's great for development, but yeah, I think if some of them more like probably like just like a bit degree of permanence with lifestyle. But you know, in some instances, if you're like spinning up Docker instances on AWS or using one of the cloud hosting platforms, it works really well for that, I guess. You know, because and managing multiple instances of the same thing, you know, with a load balancer, that's you know, nice for that. But yeah, and I suppose it's kind of like having spent a lot of time, a lot of time being in, that whole like. It doesn't feel being in that kind of like Linux, like proper LAMP environment. It's like Docker. Yeah, I guess it just feels less familiar. Yeah, and you end up having to jump through hoops that you don't necessarily. They wouldn't be there if you were using a more traditional VM setup or whatever. Yeah, anyway, so it's easy to. So you can download the community edition. There's a paper one, but. Oh yeah, and it's not really properly open source either, I guess. Yeah, so you just spin up a Docker container like this. There's lots more information on Docker Hub, and yeah, so yeah, so but yeah, so some things like sort of coming back to the Git hooks. You could have a Git hook that kicked off a Docker container to run your unit tests, and then like just trash it after that sort of thing. Yeah, there's although there's a Docker image in in the Docker hub's like where people's, where all Docker images are kept in. So there's loads to choose from. It's a Joomla one, but there's also Joomla ones in the Joomla project repository on GitHub, including Docker containers for each PHP version, which is really nice to use. And it's just it just uses a config file. It's just a YAML file, and you can use Docker Compose to create containers from your YAML file. And the nice thing is you can look at like containers that are already out there, and you can read the YAML file and see what they do, and you can mash bits together, and it's easy to create new ones really, or versions, that sort of thing. I'm conscious of time, so I'll just quickly touch on Vagrant. Vagrant is kind of like a precursor to Docker. It's I don't know, it's fun too. It's the same in the sense of there's also like really good container images for Joomla, and a lot of the containers, Vagrant's maybe more geared up for development and testing sort of thing. So you can get there's lots of good Vagrant containers, with a good array of development tools. And the Joomla tools, Vagrant base is really nice too. Yeah, so it's pretty similar in a way to Docker. You just you'd initialize it with one command, and then spin it up, start it, boot it up, and then you can just SSH onto it, and then you can just create a site on the Vagrant container or instance. So the last option of these deployment, touch on is a little bit different in a way. So something we've been using for a while too, as an alternative to using Akeeba UNiTE. So basically, I don't know, kind of odd. So yeah, the idea that you can have one file system, and you can create Joomla instances using symbolic links in Linux is kind of like, it's like really simple, but possibly really a bit complicated too. So the idea is you could have many Joomla instances, and but each Joomla instance would only contain basically an index file and a config file, and everything else is just symbolically linked to a separate file set. So, so you can have this sort of setup here. So you can have like a directory called parents. You might have, and you end up with different versions of your system site. Have alpha, beta, prod, and then you end up with like children, and each of these children would be pointing to one of these parents in a sense. So, and you can just create as many children as you like. It's like kind of on like a disk, So if you had 100 Joomla sites on a server, you'd only need one set of Joomla files, which is kind of nice in a way, the whole deduplication thing. But so it's a bit more of a home-cooked option, I guess. Yeah. So we use a script. All these are in the GitHub repository. It's much easier to read there. But so it's basically you call this is a script to create a new child, symlink child. You call a script with a site name and a system name and a source. The source would be like what the parent, the name of the parent. So, it goes away, creates a database, creates a user, creates a database, and gives you user privileges. And then, it basically goes and dumps the database from source, which is the parent in a sense, and then loads the database from the parent into the new child. And then it goes and makes a bunch of, you can see, makes a bunch of directories. Some of these directories, obviously, you need like the images directory. So each child would have its own images directory, but and cache, and temp, and logs. So these are like, in a sense, the real directories, and everything else ends up being yeah, okay. And then you take the configuration file from your parent, and you replace a bunch of stuff. So, so you replace things with a new system name, database name, and this sort of thing. And then you write out the configuration file back to the child, the new child that you just created. And you do need some physical files, but the only ones you need is HD access, robots index, the front end index, and the back end index. So that's physically copying the files, and then and this is, here you can see we're creating symbolic links. It's just a shortcut. I'm not used to symbolic links, basically. Yeah, so you're creating symbolic links from the parent to the child. So these are all links that works that way. And then, in the administrator folder as well. Yeah, so the advantage of this, apart from having only, kind of one set of files from all the sites, you can update things from one place and it's updated everywhere. Yeah, so that's.
If you wanted to put an extension, would you put it into the parent so it could be replicated across all the children?
Yeah.
Or would you put it just into a child and it only be on that one child?
You put it in the parent, because in practice the child doesn't have anything. It only knows what the parent's got.
So they always have to be in sync, as it were, for all the extensions.
Yeah. So that's, in a sense, that's where it gets more complicated. So, for example, if you want to do update Joomla, you can update in the parent, because you can run the parent as a live site as well, sort of thing. But then, well, that's great because all the files are now updated in all the children's because the parent's updated. But you've still got to update the database in all the children, so you probably end up having to run run an or you could use a Joomla command line interface to update. You probably can't use that actually. But yeah, or the way we tend to do it is like a headless browser. It basically logs into administrator, goes into extensions database and clicks the fix button, and then it goes and fixes it. Which is, yeah. So that's kind of there's added complexity in that sense, and that's the downside. So it's only really useful if you've got like hundreds, of sites that are all kind of the same, I suppose. Yeah. So yeah, and equally, so we had that first script that's for deploying a symlink child, and there's another script for repointing a symlink child. So it's kind of works nicely. So if you end up with like two parents, one's like live and the other's like dev, or one's like v1, v2, you can basically update the child to be pointing to a different parent. Does that make sense? Yeah. So basically, you'd run this script and you'd pass in the source and you pass in the target, and it would go and change the child to point to. So it's kind of nice. You can update. All the updates will be instantaneous. And, there's no. If you want to switch from version 1 to version 2, it's just switch the symlinks and that's so you can see basically it's just dash F is like forced to overwrite the existing symlink. Yeah, so you can see. Yeah, as a use case, having hundreds of sites which are almost exactly the same is not really that common a thing, I guess. But for some things like Joomla.com, like SiteGround. Is that SiteGround they do Joomla.com? Where they basically got like thousands of Joomla sites, and they've all only got like a fixed number of templates and a fixed number, and you can't add extensions. That would probably work really well for them, you know, because they could have their thousands of Joomla websites with like one bunch of files, you know, one Joomla file set. So. But not too many people do that. Is there any questions on that before? I know that's quite complicated, but dive into. So next we're going to touch on headless automation via headless browsers. How many people use headless browsers? Okay. So headless browsers have been around quite a long time. Bit of background. And basically it's a way to script the physical interaction that a user would have with a website, you know. So yeah, historically it's usually done with Selenium, and you'd write your script, and then Selenium would go and execute your, you know, your actions. You know, click this button, click that button, that sort of thing. Selenium's nice, a bit Java. It's kind of a heavy Java thing. But you know, it's quite a lot. There's other ones more recently. It's quite complicated because there's like there's both drivers and kind of libraries in a way. So PhantomJS is another headless browser that's a bit newer, and Nightmare is like an optimization of PhantomJS. And you know, there's different drivers for these headless browsers. So Casper.js is like is kind of like just a wrapper layer on Phantom. It's a lot easier to script. You still got to write JavaScript, but apart from that. And CodeCept is like a JavaScript version of Codeception in a sense, which is really nice. CodeCept is my favourite at the moment. Zombie.js is another new one too. So yeah, you just automate tasks, you know, and find objects to click and interact with through the document object model. Yeah, it's nice. Usually it tends to be used more for testing, like system testing, acceptance testing, rather than automation itself. But it works well for automation too. Yeah, automating testing, automating tasks. Like you know, basically nearly anything that you can do physically, you could automate with a headless browser. There's occasionally a few gotchas. Yeah, so I went dive into Casper.js. I've been using Casper.js for about 3 years, I guess. You can see the code is a Casper script. I think this one. Oh yeah. So this Casper script just updates Joomla basically. So you start Casper. I hate JavaScript here, so it's fine. You set your screen size, and it's and there's some date stamps and stuff. You pass in 3 parameters: domain name, username and password. It's fine, normal. Yeah, so you can see it's like Casper start goes to the integrated folder, and it fills in the form, which is the login form, username and password with the ones you set. And then, because it's JavaScript, and JavaScript's it's kind of like forced to be sequential, even though it's kind of like JavaScript one node, I guess is. Yeah, so you kind of this sort of dodgy Casper. Then I think it's kind of to make it execute concurrently, one thing at a time, unlike Node would usually do. Yeah, so you can see all these things. Yeah, so some of these things, like the screen capture things, is quite nice. You can just set a Casper script, write a quick Casper script that goes to like nearly every page of your website and takes a screen grab, and then you can like visually skim over the images and say, oh, yeah, they look fine. Look if you're doing updates, or if you want some really quick mobile testing, you can change this down to be more like a phone size, and then screen grab your responsive views as well. So yeah, so you can see it's like login. This sort of thing is just Create the screen grab. Well, the inner stuff. It's just got a date stamp in it anyway. So, and yeah, it's JavaScript. It's ugly. So here we can see we're checking in this fetch text status. So basically, you're looking for a button, and then you're looking. Yeah. So this it just like reads the Joomla version from the footer of the administrator's template and compares that with the version that you set. Yeah. You know, click on the purge button in the admin bit. Take another screen grab. End up with a lot of screen grabs. We run automated testing across our across our platform. So it basically logs into every Joomla instance, and it takes maybe a couple of hours to run, and you end up with like a gigabyte of PNG files that you can skim over to check.